back to being a SQL Server MVP. She's the author and co-author of several SQL Server books, one of which is I Have Your Beginning T-SQL 2012. Kathy's a co-author on this one. She loves speaking and writing about SQL Server, and in her spare time enjoys spending time with the family and friends. And you can also find her at the local karaoke bar or climbing stairs on tall buildings. And if you go to SQL Pass, she does the karaoke. She gets everybody together for that. So go ahead, Kathy. I mean, you can introduce yourself again. We're just thrilled she's able to help us out with the lecture.
Thanks. I wish I could be there in person. I'm hearing a lot of echo all of a sudden, though. I don't know if there's another mic up there that seems better. Okay, let me start again. Okay, thanks. I wish I could be there in person with all of you. This is not possible, so here I am remotely. I'm just really across the river over in Edwardsville. I just was not able to drive right now. Just had surgery the other day, so recovering at home from that. Anyway, what I would like to talk to you today about is SSIS 2012. Everything I'm going to talk about can also be applied to 2014 as well. I'd like to point out my new blog at kathysql.com. It's relatively new. I've just been using it for a few months, but I do have at least a couple of SSIS related posts out there already. Two of them have to do with the new data tap feature, which is something I'm not going to have time to cover today. You probably need about 20 to 25 minutes just on that one feature. So if you're interested in learning more about that, be sure to go out to my blog and learn more. And I can never get that first slide to advance. There we go. If you are someone who used DTS and then had to upgrade to 2005 SSIS, you had a pretty steep learning curve. I know when I was actually working for Microsoft, a lot of my customers were avoiding upgrading, and they were, just almost kind of like a fear of it, even though it's really not so bad. But there is definitely a learning curve between DTS and SSIS. In 2012, Microsoft actually did a really big overall, kind of started from scratch in some ways on SSIS. But the good thing is there's no steep learning curve. Everything that you know about SSIS can be applied to SSIS 2012. There's a little bit of learning curve when it comes to deployment, but otherwise it's actually very similar. Things don't necessarily look the same, but it's not too bad. So hopefully nobody is avoiding SSIS 2012 because they think it's going to be difficult to learn. It's definitely not. And if you're still on DTS, let me know, because I work for the company that can help you out of DTS. We have a product that can upgrade packages from DTS to SSIS, and I've actually used it on one customer engagement a couple of years ago, and it works really well. So this is my last slide of this entire presentation. Everything else is going to be demos. What I did is I looked at all of the changes with SSIS at 2012, and I divided them up into 5 areas: cosmetic, convenient, development, troubleshooting and logging. I guess maybe I could have made that one too, but that's okay. And deployment. I also have a link here that lets you download the development tool as well. That's the latest link I could find. So if you want to write that down, and I'll make sure I get the slides to Julie as well. I'm going to go ahead and jump into demos. The very first thing that is different this cosmetic thing that's different, is that we no longer have bids. I kind of hate that. I like saying bids. It's easy to say. What we now have is SSDT, SQL Server Data Tools. And even then, you've got to be kind of careful because there are SSDT downloads out there that have nothing to do with SSIS. So you have to make sure when you do download that you are downloading SSDT for business intelligence. So that's one thing that's different. It doesn't affect the way that you work, but it's just something to keep in mind. I really hate that acronym BIDS. It was so much easier to say, but it's kind of a cosmetic change. One thing that is interesting, do I still have the web page up? There are different versions of the tools run. Basically, you can run the tools in different versions of Visual Studio. I'm actually running SQL Server 2012 with the Visual Studio 2010. Once you get into Visual Studio 2012 or 2013, it changes to the more Metro interface. I haven't tried the 2013 yet. At the current customer where I'm working at, we're using the 2012, and I'm finding it difficult. It's like everything is the same color. Everything is kind of black. I've modified it slightly to use a different, I can't remember what it was, not a color palette, but a different style that made it a little bit easier. But at least at this version, I'm not a fan. And I haven't tried the 2013 yet. So all of the demos that I'm using is the older interface where you actually have different colors. At least for me, that's easier to see and see what I'm doing actually. One thing you'll notice right up front is that there is definitely a different look and feel about everything. You'll see some of the icons have changed. Notice the rounded corners on things. There was a joke going on at the past summit when all of these changes were announced, which was probably back at the 2011 PASS, that there was a team that just worked on making all these rounded corners. I'm sure it was just a joke, but this is just something that looks different. It's not going to affect the way that you work. The status icons are really different. Let me just run the container. If I run this, I'll see that the icons are different. I have these little swirlies in the corner. I have these little icons in the corner instead of the entire task lighting up with the different colors. So that's something else that looks different. You may or may not, I got used to it right away. It doesn't bother me either way. It just does look different. If I'm in the data flow, I have a blue color. I have blue and red instead of green and red. I'm not sure why they did that. Again, it's just a cosmetic difference that's not going to affect you. Another, I'm going to call it a cosmetic difference, and trust me, this is my least favorite part about this presentation. Things get better after we get out of this section. The toolbox. So if I just go up and say view toolbox, I get this empty toolbox. That's because there is a separate toolbox just for SSIS, and I can turn that on I can see it if I right click and find it there. I can also turn it off and on with this little icon up here in the corner. So it's a very specific toolbox just for SSIS, and there's these different sections. I've actually moved something up into, I don't think that's one of my favorites, but I must have moved something just to show. You have a favorite sections. By default, you get the data flow task and the execute SQL task, but you can move other things to that favorite area. I still am not going to say I'm a fan of how they did this. At least, I've been working all year with SSIS 2012, at my current customer, and I'm still spending time trying to figure out where a particular container or data flow happens to be. So still not a fan of this. Like I said, things will get better as we go along. So that's it for cosmetic. Cosmetic meaning these things look different or have a different name, not really going to affect how you work. The next area is convenience. Now we're going to get some things that I've actually had some people at user groups or SQL Saturdays actually applaud when I've shown some of these other items. So let's open up this package. So the first thing I have to show you is that I have one of my databases is offline. Instead of spending a lot of time trying to connect to that database, SSIS immediately knew there was a problem and just let me open the package. How long have you sat there waiting in the past for a connection that's not going to work, but you can't do anything? It's just kind of stuck right there. So all I have to do right now is to go ahead and solve my problem, which right now I have this database that's offline. I'm going to bring it online, and now I can just right-click, test connectivity, and things are back to normal. So I believe that is pretty nice, because I know, at least in my experience, I have sat there waiting and waiting and not able to kill, not able to stop. It just sits there and looks. Another thing concerning connection managers is that now we have the concept of project level connection managers that you automatically inherit. So if I create a new connection manager here, I don't know what I want to create. Let's just create a file one. Let me just create a file while I'm at it. So if I create a connection manager to that, and I do it at the project level, it automatically is inherited in every one of my packages. The other thing that I can do is, if I have a connection manager that I've defined at the package level, I can right-click and I can actually convert it to a project connection. So what I would suggest here is, if you have connections that are going to be used throughout your project, for example, to your data warehouse or to a particular source of data, go ahead and create them at the project level. And then any that are specific to a particular package, go ahead and create those at the package level. Okay, kind of like if you work with SSRS, the things that you use project-wide, create at the project level, at a particular item, so just think about the scope of how you're going to do it. Okay, so the next item I'm going to show you, I've actually had people applaud for this one. What happens if I accidentally accidentally delete this, or delete it and then change my mind? In the past, what I've had to do is either hope that the last time I saved this was right before I made that change, and maybe I can close my package and not save it and then get that item back, or chances are probably what I would do is have to just recreate it. So now we actually have an undo and a redo. So this is something that, am I hearing applause? I'm hoping I'm hearing applause back there. Yay! This is something that's like, any Windows application should have this. I don't know why we didn't have it. So that is a wonderful thing. The next item, so have you ever copied something inside an SSIS package and then pasted it? Where did it end up? Well, it might have ended up in another state, at least another city. Right? I mean, you have to, it's probably not going to be on the screen you can see. You're probably going to have to move the screen around quite a bit to find it. So now, if I paste, that was not an accident there, if I paste, it actually goes wherever my cursor happened to be. That's another item that has really made people happy. Again, it should have just worked before. It's not earth-shattering, but it's something that, you know, should work. Here's another thing. So this happened to me a lot last year. I was working, actually we were using the 2008 R2 version, and last year I spent the entire year doing SSIS. It was really fun. I really had a great time. The problem was that these data flows I was working with were very, very elaborate. They had lots of union alls. There was also a third-party task that they used to grab error messages. So what this particular customer would do is, like, it would start with the data source, and then depending on different conditions throughout the flow, it would redirect rows and eventually gather them all up in a union all. And then that union all would then insert those rows into this logging. Okay, so what I was doing last year is not a lot of new development, but what I was doing was troubleshooting, trying to figure out bugs. I was adding new features. So when I'd add a new feature, for example, they needed a new column added to the data warehouse in this particular fact table or whatever. They have a new fact they want to add. And in this particular, actually I shouldn't even say fact table, because this particular data warehouse was not set up the Kimball method. But anyway, I would just be like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do here? Because as soon as I would go in and modify that data source, I would just see red error symbols lighting up all over the place. It was just such a hassle, because every one of these union alls would be messed up. There would be things messed up everywhere. I would just cringe when I heard, you know, I would just pray really before I'd look at that data source, hoping that the column I needed was already there and that I didn't have to add it, because I knew what was going to happen. So I'm assuming some other of you have experienced something like this. It really hit home to me last year. So what I have here is I have a couple of sources that just have some data, nothing fancy, and that data is being gathered up into a union all. So in the past, what would happen if I made a change to one of these sources? My union all would blow up, and then if I opened it up, I would get this really ugly looking error message saying, do you want to delete invalid mappings? Do you want to base it on it just was a nightmare all the time. Eventually I got pretty good at figuring it out, but what a nightmare. So if I came in here and I just actually, let's just give it a different name here. Okay, so it's still the same data, I just gave it a different name. So now I've broken my union all. In the past, I couldn't even get to this point. What I can do now is I could actually come in here and fix it easily enough. I mean, that's a big deal for me. That would have saved me so much time last year. The other cool thing, which I don't know if there's an advantage of this over just going in the union all and fixing it, but I also have this ability to right-click. I can get it to right-click at the right place. There we go. Resolve references. So in this resolve references, what you do is you drag over your source and you drag over your destination and you remap. And it's kind of weird. I thought it had a drop-down box which I thought I could use, but trying to do it that way didn't really work. I found I had to just drag the two items in, and now it's fixed. So hopefully this is going to save you a ton of time. I know I would have loved to have had it work this way for me last year. And if there's questions, I mean, I should probably stop once in a while and see if there's any questions, or we can save them for the end if that is better for everybody. I'll just continue on unless I hear something from you. The next thing that I'd like to talk about is variables. The variables I can find by right-clicking and choosing variables, and they show up down in this little window. I have to apologize, there's some BI Express icons showing up here. I don't really want to show those, but you can just ignore them. Some of the functionality that we have in BI Express you can actually now get in 2012. So if I create a new variable, and set up the properties, what usually happens? Well, in this case, I did map it to the package level, but what happens, at least to me, quite often, is I would accidentally map my variable at the wrong scope. I would have it accidentally mapped to a not usually a data flow, but some kind of a task, and then I would not be able to find it again. Would be one thing. I'm like, I know I created that variable. Where did it go? So starting with 2012, there's a way to move the variable to a different scope. So instead of deleting it and starting over, I can just click this button and I can find the place where I would like for it to go. Notice that it did disappear because I'm at the scope of the package. There's another feature that I can turn on that, and maybe this was available in previous versions and I just didn't know about it. I mean, that's a possibility. But now you can turn on show variables of all scopes. So I can turn that filter on, and then it's going to show up regardless of what I have selected. So that's pretty nice. Another thing that is very convenient is that, convenient, is that if I decide, instead of assigning a value, that I would like to have an expression, not sure if I'm doing this correctly. Yep, looks like it worked. Notice that you may not have noticed, but as soon as I did that, the icon changed. So this is something that you can get with BI Express, but now it is available with SQL Server 2012 and later. So any place that you use variable, not a variable, let me back up. Any place that you use an expression, you'll now see a little symbol letting you know that. That was just one of those things that it would really cause you to take longer troubleshooting because you didn't know why something wasn't working the way you expected because there was an expression that you didn't realize. Another thing, and I should have shown you that earlier, is in this filter thing, you can show or hide system variables. There's so many of them. Most of the time, you're not going to want to see them. Okay, so that's really it on convenience. Any questions before I move on to the development changes? Okay, I'll go ahead and take that as a no, unless I hear otherwise. I'm hearing something. No questions. Okay. Alrighty. The next thing I want to talk about is development. There's not a lot different with development. There are a few tasks that are different. For example, the pivot task, and again, how do I find it, is different. You know, I don't have a demo prepared for that. To me, it was difficult to understand before. Now it is a little bit easier, at least when I've played with it. There is a new task added that I really, really like called the expression task. There was something like this back in the DTS days where you could just add a task to assign a value to a variable. So in this case, I've got a variable str value, and I can assign a value to it. It can be any kind of an expression. It can be you know, using functions, whatever you want to do here. In the past, you know, when I've worked with variables, there are a lot of places where I can change the value of a variable. There's, you know, you can have an expression, you can grab the value, you can use an execute SQL task and grab something, save it in a variable. You know, there's a lot of places. Every once in a while, I would end up resorting to the script task because I couldn't get what I needed to, you know, I couldn't really do what I needed to do except for creating a script task. It seemed like overkill for just assigning a value to a variable. So now we have this expression task that is very easy to use, and I'm pretty happy about it. Here's another interesting thing. So if I have a file, let me go out and create a file. And let's say I have column 1, column 2, column 3, column 4, column 5, and then I have some data. But not all of my rows have everything in them. So you might think, well, let's see, you might have some rows like that. But I could actually just do something like this. What if my data was messy, you know, respect, where I didn't have all of the pieces of data that I needed. This would be difficult to work with in SSIS. So the cool thing is, let me go ahead and common, and again, I've got to find it, and then of course I've got all these Task Factory ones in there too. I don't want to see. Flat file source. No. Here's my file. And if I look at the columns, you can see that it figured out that I had my 5 columns, but it didn't complain where I had data missing.
Very nice.
Yeah, so I'm pretty excited about that. Yay! So if you've had to deal with, I don't think I've had to deal with data that look like that, but if you have, then you can imagine. This will save you some time, and you might, I'm not sure what you would have to do with that. Maybe import it and fix it, and I don't know, import it into a table and fix it, parse it out. Yeah. Okay. There are some other tasks added having to do with change data capture. I don't want to really do a change, you know, that could be like an entire session in itself just on change data capture. But change data capture, you have special tables that are created, and you've got to keep track of what you've pulled and what's ready to be pulled and all of that. There are some new, like I could see one right now, the CDC splitter. So that's a new transform. I think there's a CDC, other sources. I believe there's a CDC source, which I'm not finding it, but I believe there is. And there's also, somebody see it and I just don't?
Yeah, you backed it towards the bottom.
Towards the bottom.
Yeah.
There's a splitter.
CDC,
other sources, CDC source. So in your data flow, you've got the CDC source and your CDC splitter, and that splitter redirects your rows depending on whether it's, you know, a delete or an update. And then on your control flow, there are also several, there's also the CDC control task. It seems like there was something else. I haven't really worked with CDC in a production environment, but I know that I have seen it demoed, and I've played around with it a little bit. The other thing that's really cool is that there are, for Oracle, there's also the Oracle CDC tasks from Attunity, which in the previously you could purchase. Now it's part of SSIS, which is really cool. Then there's also some new tasks and you know, for data quality as well. So any of those could be topics, you know, among themselves. So if that's an area of your interest, well, then you know that you do have those available in 2012. Okay, so that's it for development. Not a lot new, but a couple of really nice little features. Any questions before I move on to deployment?
No questions.
No questions. Okay. I must be doing a great job, or maybe, I don't know. These, you know, it's pretty straightforward material, I think. Okay, deployment. This is the area where you're going to have if there is a learning curve, this is the area where it's going to be. We have an entire new way of thinking about SSIS when we talk about deployment. There is a new way of thinking called the project deployment model. So if I look at my project here, I could actually convert it, if I wanted to this old package deployment model. So in the past, everything was considered package deployment model, even though you, even though you had projects, every package was considered a unit of work. Okay? In 2012 and going forward, you're going to think of the project as the unit of work instead. Not so much as far as what you're trying to accomplish, but you're going to have, as far as deployment, a unit of work is going to be the project. Okay? Right now, if I create a brand new project, it automatically is in this project deployment model. If I convert or bring in an older package in, it's going to ask me what I want to do. So, what are some of the other differences here? The next thing to really think about is parameters. This is a new concept that you get just with the project deployment model. So you can see at the project level, I have parameters, and at the package level, I have parameters. So first, what are these things? If you think about variables, if I have a variable, I can assign it a value, I can use it to grab a value, I can change the value, I can use it in previous versions to pass in information. For example, if I have a master-child package, okay? Now, what Microsoft has done is they've taken some of the functionality of a variable and given that to parameters instead. So inside my package, I have variables that I can change, okay? Inside my package, I can see parameters, but they're read-only. So outside of my parameter really lives kind of outside, and inside my package, I can see it, and it's read-only. So inside my package, my parameter is read-only. And what I'll do with that parameter is I'll use it to pass in information such as maybe a server name or anything that you might pass in now. For example, if you have that master-child package set up being used. Now, how do I decide whether I want something at the project level or at the package level? Again, my suggestion is if it's something that you're going to need at that project level, then go ahead and put it in the project parameters. If it's something specific to one package, then go ahead and put it at the package level. Okay, so let's see what we can do with these. First, let's see, this is the wrong package. Let's bring the deployment one out. Okay, so this particular package, I'm actually using a few of the features. I'm using this new expression task, and I have a variable that just has an insert statement. Okay, so that's how this variable looks to get started, an insert statement. So what I'm going to do is start out running the command. I have a execute SQL task, and I'm just going to run the command, okay? And then after that, I'm going to pull a value from my parameters and change that value and then run it again. So I've got a parameter set up here. I've got an integer, and I also have a string. So this is at my package level. And if I look at the project level, I also have an integer, and I have a string as well. Hello from project parameter. Okay, so let me go back to this and get rid of some windows here. So basically what I'm doing is I'm just going to run this statement 3 times, but each time the values are going to change. So if I look at this one, I have built my statement again. I probably could have made it easier if I'd done some kind of a replace thing, but this is how I did it the day I came up with this, so we'll go with it. So basically what I'm doing is I'm saying this is my statement, but instead of those original default values, I'm going to grab the values from the parameters. So when I look at the list of values that I have available, I see that I have package parameters and project parameters, and they actually start with a $sign. Okay. If I have a script task, I can see the parameters inside the script task as well. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and run this package. It ran, and then I'm going to go back to my log, and basically it's telling me this was the default, ran it the first time, then hello from the package parameter, hello from the project parameter. So I see that it has worked. Okay, so any questions about parameters before I move on? No questions? Okay. All right. The next thing that we need to cover is how we actually deploy. Where do these packages actually live? In the past, we had a lot of choices, way too many choices. We could just have our packages live in a share. We could have them live in MSDB. We could have them live in the package store. You know, how do we want them to be configured? It was really, there was no really great answer. But there were some folks, for example, Jamie Thompson is one of them, who came up with some frameworks that involved setting up some special database, and you know, you could set this all up to make sure that, you know, passwords and things like that were secure. You know, just basically go outside what's available in SSIS and come up with your own thing. And luckily, people like Jamie came up with this. Well, in 2012, it's kind of like and they probably did. Microsoft probably worked with somebody like Jamie and came up with this new way to deploy. You still have your old way to deploy if you want it, but what I suggest is if you're in the middle of an upgrade, you probably, it might be easier to just go ahead and do the upgrade first, and then another project will probably be switching everything to this new project level deployment model. So that old connect to integration services, you will no longer need that once you are using this new project deployment model. The way we get started is we set up an integration services catalog. So we have this brand new folder in Management Studio. I'm going to right click and say create catalog. Went in the wrong window. There we go. If CLR is not enabled, it's going to enable CLR. CLR is used for this. It's going to ask for a password, and this is used for creating the encryption key. So we're going to have encryption inside this database to protect things like passwords. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And
wait, comment.
Got a question?
I just did this. Don't forget to write down that password.
Okay.
Document. You don't want to lose this one.
Okay. Yeah. So good point. Don't forget. And I've been playing around this in test situations and deleting it and starting over, so I haven't worried about it. But definitely, if you're in production, go ahead and make sure you keep that in a safe place. Okay, so once I do that, I have this little section down here that I can expand, and I can do things like create a folder. Let me go ahead and say OK. So I can create a folder where I can deploy packages. Okay, so this is where I'm going to interact with my deployed packages. I'm not going to use that old connection that we used to use. There's another thing I want to show you. I'm going to have to right-click on the databases and say refresh. We get this new database called SSIS DB. And inside here, we get a bunch of tables and a bunch of views. And the really nice thing about this is that you can use this to create your own reporting or alerting or whatever you want to do. I'll show you later that there's a lot built in already. And of course, Jamie Thompson has created a set of reports that you can go and download from Codeplex if you don't like what Microsoft provided. He's always one step ahead, I've noticed. But anyway, you can easily get information out of these and use to your advantage. I'm going to close this part up for now so we can concentrate on this part. So go ahead and go back to our package and show you how we actually will deploy. It's pretty easy. There's a ton of options. I'm not going to go through all the options, and in fact I have another session, an hour-long session just on SSIS deployment. But the easiest way to do it would be to right-click on my project and say deploy, and then when I do this, deployment wizard pops up. And it doesn't ask me for a lot of information. The first thing it does is ask me where I would like to deploy my project. So I want it at the local host, and then it remembers this from the last time I did that, which it's all lighting up red because that doesn't exist. So what is my server name, and where would I like for this project to be deployed? Okay, so that's really the only information that it asks for. There is a command line tool that you can use, and if you decide to use the command line tool, it tells you the parameters that you would use to match what you just did. So that was really all I had to do. Just answer those two questions and click deploy, and now wait. Shouldn't take too long. I'm going to close that up. Now when I go back to Management Studio, I'm going to hit refresh. And now I can see under projects, I can see my SSIS 2012 session, and I can see all of my packages that I was just working with. Oops, I didn't want to cross them out. Okay, so I always get the question, well, what if I want to make a change to one package? Can I just redeploy one package? No, you have to redeploy everything. I always get that question. I'm sure a bunch of you were thinking about that. You have to deploy the entire project. That's the unit of work for deployment. Another thing I want to show you here, and I'm not sure how long I have. I never have enough time. I have this folder called environments. And what I can do with environments is create separate environments for whatever I want. So chances are I might create something like an environment called dev, an environment called UAT, an environment called prod, whatever it is that you need. Once I create these environments, I can go in and go to the properties and set up variables. So I can set up an integer, and let's just make it 1,000. I can set up a string, and obviously I would give them some names that make sense, not the silly names I'm coming up with. Which am I in? I think it's hello from dev. Okay, so I can set up all of these different environments with different values. I can set things up to be sensitive. So for example, passwords will then be stored, encrypted in my SSIS DB database. And I can also set up permissions so that only certain people can either see the values or change the values, that type of thing. So it's really, really easy to set up. So if I want to run a package, let's say I want to run my deployment package, click execute, and I get this dialog. Here's where I can map. I can either use the same values that my parameters have, or I can map to an environment and use the parameters from use the values from the environment. Can I do this without setting it up? Okay, so let me go at the project level and say that I would like to reference the dev environment. And then I can go ahead and map these values. Instead of the defaults, I can go ahead and map to those environments. To me, it's kind of tricky though, because once I come in here and I want to execute this, then I get this red. It's saying, hey, there's environments, what do you want to do? So every time I might want to execute it manually, I've got to set this up. I also have a similar screen when I'm setting up a SQL Server agent job to map those environments. So theoretically, I could set up all three environments, and then I could set up a job that uses the dev set of values, and set another job that uses the UAT set of values, or whatever I want to do. I can also modify connection managers at this point as well. Let me go ahead and I always forget this. Okay, what's the environment I want to map to? And it automatically, since I chose that environment and I had already done the mapping at the project level, it knew, to match those up. One thing I can do is I can script this. We'll take a look at that in just a second, but I'm going to click OK, which will cause the package to run. I get this message, which is not an error message, but it's telling me that the operation, and it gives me an ID number, has started. So every execution for deployed packages will have an ID number, and that's how it is stored, and all the information about the execution is stored in that SSIS DB database. I'm going to say no for right now. But what I would like to do is take a look at my run log. So here is the run I just did. Let's see. Okay, so here was the default. Here was from the package, and here was from dev. So I overwrote the project parameters with the dev parameters. Okay. Another thing that's been kind of a pain in the butt in the past is that in order to execute execute a package in a stored procedure, for example, you would have to use XP command shell, something like that. You could use that DT exec, but you had to, use that. It's a command. It's not a T-SQL. So now we actually have a way to execute packages with T-SQL commands. There's quite a bit to it. It's not just one straightforward command. So basically, we're creating an execution context. We're creating the execution. We are assigning whatever parameters we want to use. Where's the package located, and finally, it executes. So if I run this, what I get back here is the execution ID. This is execution ID 3. So for some reason, I wanted to go trace that back, I would have that value. So now let me go ahead and run this, and I should probably get the same values. So it used the same set of parameters. So this is really nice. We still have the DT exec command. There's a newer version of it that knows how to handle parameters. So we still have that. And if you use that and you tell it, this is where this package lives, it still records everything. Okay. Any questions about this running the packages?
Yes.
Okay.
Got a question. Okay. According to you, what's the purpose of the password that they use on the SSIS? Yeah.
When I created that, it's so whenever you use encryption in SQL Server, you have to create these master keys. And that's not really an area I'm real strong in, but you create master key and database keys. So basically, the reason we're doing that is because we're using encryption in the SSIDB database, and we're using encryption so that we can encrypt like passwords.
Okay.
So that's the purpose of it. We're supplying that. It's setting up this encryption for you.
So if you have to share in an environment, you have a team, so how can they be able to share the execution, the package? How can you share the package if it's already password protected? While before, we can actually, once you have the, permission, permission, then you'll be able to, to see it with your credentials. But this time, it's, I would say server, another password, so how can they see it?
That password you don't have to give to everybody. That password was just, so it was used to set up the encryption in the database. That's what that password is for. The packages are not password protected. It was just set up encryption.
So to really deploy the package, you have to move it out of that location for anyone to be able to see what's being deployed. I mean, how can you share that package that you deploy with your team? That's all I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah, and I don't have, there are rights that you can give. There are roles, built-in roles that you give to the people that you want to be able to see the packages. I'm not really prepared to go over all of that. There's 3 or 4 built-in roles that you can assign to people so that they can see them, and it really has nothing to do with that password. Offhand, I don't have exactly the answer you're looking for, but there's definitely built-in security roles. I don't know if they're in that. I'm not sure if they're inside. Maybe they're application roles. Nope, I don't see them there. Maybe they're in MSDB. But basically, there's permissions that you set up, and what gets encrypted are just things like passwords, not everything.
Okay, another question. I know you show another folder that's called environment. Can you move that package to the environment, and I'll give them a permission to use it in the environment, folder? Because that folder has already that pre-building function, property that you can allow people to see it. Is it possible?
Yeah, you can set up permissions on each item. So you can, or actually, I don't know if it's on each item. Let's see. You set up permissions on these environments. Who can read them, who can modify them, who can manage the permissions. So everything is, you before you set this up, you figure out, who needs to do what, and then you just assign the permissions. That's for each of these environments.
Is it just the permissions to modify the environment variables?
Yes.
Is that what you're assigning there? Right.
Yeah, these are permissions specifically about this environment. So let's say you were allowed a group of developers to be able to do whatever they needed to do in the dev environment, but you didn't want them touching prod. You could easily set that up. Okay, let me see what else. Okay, before I run out of time, I want to show you there's built-in reporting with this. There's standard reports that are pretty good. But, as I mentioned, if you go out on CodePlex, Jamie Thompson has created an SSIS report pack that have even better reports. Basically, you can, drill down. You can use this to get information about the run. You can compare durations, like if you see that a package is taking longer than it used to, that type of thing. There's a lot of information you can get out of this. The really cool thing is that you don't have to do anything to set this logging up. So if I go back and look at my package, if I can see, I can't see the top. If I would go and look at logging, I don't have any logging turned on for this package at all. I can still use that old-fashioned logging if I want. So automatically, I get this logging by default, and it's controlled. If I look here, there is there's a server-wide default. You can also set it at the project level, at the package level, at the execution level. You probably want to leave it at basic, which will give you information about what ran, what the values were when it ran, performance information, but there are several levels. You can have no logging at all, which you probably don't want that. If you're interested in just performance, you can leave it at performance. Then there's also a verbose level, which will record probably lots more than you really need to know. So probably if you're troubleshooting something, you may want to change the level 2 verbose just for a particular package or just for a particular run of that package. Okay. Let's see if there's anything else. Oh, I want to show you one more thing. If I look at my project, if I look in my bin folder, I see that there's an ISPAC file. So what I can do, if I am a developer and I want to hand off this project for someone else to deploy, all I have to do is hand off this ISPAC file. So inside it, it's kind of like a zip file, and I believe you can actually change the setting to zip and you can get all the individual things out. But if I double click this, I get that same wizard that I had before, and basically it just says where is the project I want to deploy, which it just points back to itself in this case. You know, where do I want it to go, and the path. So that's really all I have to do, is just provide this file. I can also run this file from command line as well. I mean, there's so many options with this. It's unbelievable. So in my deployment session, I go over all these different options. Another thing that you can do is deploy with T-SQL commands. You can deploy with PowerShell. There's just a ton of options available. Let's see if there's anything else that... So one other thing would be like the troubleshooting. Let me show you the logging. Like I said, it's on by default. You don't have to do anything with that. If I look at troubleshooting, there is a thing called a data viewer. Hopefully a lot of you have used in the past. Previously, this should probably go in the convenience section. Previously, there were like 5 or 6 clicks to get to it. Now you can bring that data viewer up and enable it or disable it with just a right click. So basically 2 clicks to enable or disable. There's also a new feature. We really don't. It takes about 10 minutes to go over, so I'm not going to go over it, called a data tab. What a data tab is instead of manually running the package and looking at the data as it comes through. So let me go ahead and enable that. So if I execute this task, when it gets to the data viewer, I can see the data. I can't get it to come over to the right window. There we go. I can see the data. So let's say I had a, you know, some different transforms in here, and I want to see how the data looks as it goes through the data flow. I can add these data viewers and look at it. So what a data tab does is instead of having this when you're running the package manually, you can schedule the package to run and use the data tab to dump that data out to a file. And as I said, it's a little tricky to set up. So actually, that's my old blog. This is the address for my old blog where I talked about how to set a data tab up. And I believe it's also on my new blog as well. I believe I copied those over, so if you're interested in that. So basically, it's another troubleshooting feature. Instead of manually running the package and watching the data tabs, watching the data viewers, these data tabs actually export what you would see instead. So it's not something you want all the time. It's just for troubleshooting. So that's all I've got today. Oh, let me show you one more thing. I have to have notes on this because there's so many things. One more cool thing. If I right-click on my project, I can choose versions, and if let's say I had several versions of my project deployed, I can actually revert to an older version if I want. This is not really, backup and restore, that type of thing, but it is a convenient thing just in case you would have to get back to something. So I thought that was kind of neat. They added that. That was also something we had back in the day with DTS. We could revert to earlier versions. So any more questions?
Is there a concept of now, like, I guess, project level security instead of the way that it was on package level security, or do those concepts still exist?
Oh, I see which. I don't think so. Yeah, on these I didn't even pay attention to what I had them set at. I believe that those options are still the same. I believe that you would, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking that there's something that, does it automatically change it to don't save sensitive when you deploy it? Man, I'm drawing a blank here. If I have my package, this one's encrypt sensitive user key. I don't have any sensitive data in here, so I would have to probably play with this. I'm not sure if you have to manually go in and say don't save sensitive before you deploy it or not. I'm kind of, in the back of my mind, I'm kind of thinking that it automatically does that, but I could be wrong.
Yes,
So I am not sure.
But then you have to have both package and product at the same level.
Okay.
If you have